The lecture hall went silent the moment Dr. Evelyn Harper slid the exam paper across the floor toward the man holding a mop. 30 faculty members watched. She smiled like it was a joke everyone was supposed to understand. The janitor, Jordan Blake, looked down at the page, then up at her. He did not speak. He set the mop against the wall, picked up a pen from the lectern, and started writing. 3 minutes, and a professor in the front row stopped breathing. Nobody had told him this man could read equations. The morning began the way most mornings began for Jordan Blake. He arrived at Whitman University before the lights came on, pushed his cart down the long marble corridor of the mathematics building, and started his rounds in the same order he had followed for nearly 4 years. Empty classrooms, half-finished coffee cups on the desks, white boards covered in symbols other people had written, and then walked away from. He read those whiteboards sometimes, not for long, just long enough to follow the line of thought before he wiped it clean. Then he kept moving. The cart had a wheel that squeaked on the 3rd floor and didn't squeak on the 2nd, and he had stopped trying to fix it sometime during his 2nd winter on the job. Frank Delaney. The maintenance supervisor said hello when their schedules overlapped and never asked questions when they didn't. Frank had hired Jordan without checking much beyond the address on the application. Polite man, took every shift offered, never called out sick. That was enough for Frank, and Jordan preferred it that way. Jordan was 34 years old. He had been on the academic track once at a state school 2 states over, and he had been good at it. People had used the word promising. Then his mother got sick, and the medical bills arrived faster than the family could pay them, and the money meant for tuition became money for something else. By the time the funerals were behind him, and the bills were paid down, the scholarship was gone, and the door he had walked through once had closed quietly behind him. He did not talk about that part of his life. He had built a wall around it years ago and kept it standing. The silence around him at Whitman was a silence he had chosen, and he intended to keep choosing it for as long as the work allowed. By 9 o'clock that Tuesday in October, the mathematics department was already moving. A quarterly faculty review had been scheduled in Lecture Hall B, the kind of internal event where senior professors presented research updates and graded each other's work in slow, polite voices. Jordan had cleaned the hall the night before. He returned that morning with his cart to mop a sticky patch near the side aisle, replace a burnt-out bulb above the projector, and refill the water pitchers along the side table. He worked along the edge of the room while the faculty filed in. None of them looked at him. He didn't expect them to. He had made it most of his career out of not being looked at, and he had grown comfortable inside the lack of attention. Dr. Evelyn Harper walked in last. She was in her late 40s, sharply dressed, and she carried a stack of papers under her arm the way some people carried a weapon. Her work in algebraic topology had earned her 2 grants, 1 book, and a permanent seat on the hiring committee. Students used the word brilliant before they used any other word about her, and faculty used it more carefully. She had been short with everyone all week. 2 of her grants were under review. A junior faculty member had quietly published in her exact subfield 2 months earlier, and the department had not yet decided whose paper would carry more weight at the next review board. Whatever pressure she carried into the room that morning, none of it had been placed there by Jordan Blake. The session opened with announcements from Dr. Raymond Caldwell, the head of the department, a man in his early 60s, who ran his meetings with the patience of someone who had stopped being impressed by anything a long time ago. Then, Harper stepped forward to lead the working segment of the morning. She held up a packet she had prepared for the visiting evaluators, a research-level problem set meant to demonstrate the department's analytical depth, and announced that everyone in the room would have 15 minutes to attempt it. She walked the rows and handed the packets out one at a time. Her pace was measured. She liked the moment. Faculty members took the pages without comment and began reading. When she reached the end of the last row, she had 1 packet still in her hand. She stopped, turned slightly, and her eyes found Jordan, who was at that moment running the mop along the side aisle, slow and methodical the way he always did. "Mr. Blake," she said. The room shifted. A few faculty heads turned. Jordan stopped the mop and let his hands rest on the handle. "You're always in here," Harper continued. Her voice was friendly on the surface. the friendliness of a person who knows the audience will read the layer underneath. Working hard. I've watched you wipe these boards down 100 times. You must have absorbed something by now. A small ripple of laughter moved through the front rows. Polite, cautious, but laughter all the same. One of the younger professors looked at the floor instead of at Jordan. "Why don't you take this one?" Harper said, holding the last packet out toward him. "We're giving the faculty 15 minutes. I'd love to see what you come up with." Dr. Margaret Whitlock, seated in the second row, looked at her notes and did not look up again. 2 seats down from her, Caldwell set his pen down on his notepad and left it there. He did not say anything. The room registered both gestures and pretended it hadn't. Jordan walked toward Harper without hurrying. He did not look at the rest of the room. He took the packet from her hand and did not say, "Thank you." The cover sheet read, "Evaluation Set Advanced Analysis and Algebraic Structures." A small line of text below the title noted the problems were drawn from current research questions and were intended for graduate-level review. He looked at the first page. Then he looked at Harper. She was smiling the smile of someone who had set up a punchline and was already waiting for the silence before it landed. She gestured loosely toward the back of the room, indicating he could sit at one of the empty desks. He did not move toward the back of the room. He set the mop against the wall behind him. He walked to the lectern at the front of the hall instead. He set the packet down on its slanted surface, picked up the black pen the previous speaker had left there, and uncapped it. Most of the faculty were still on the first page. A few were watching Jordan now with the half-curious, half-uncomfortable expression of people waiting for a joke to either continue or end. Harper crossed her arms. "Mr. Blake," she said, and now there was a different note in her voice. "There's a desk for you in the back." Jordan did not answer. He read the first problem twice. He read it the way someone reads a contract they intend to sign. Then he wrote a single line of notation across the top of the page, drew a short bracket beneath it, and began. The pen moved without hesitation. For nearly 30 seconds, the only sound in the room was the scratch of a ballpoint across paper. Even and unhurried the way a man writes a letter he has already composed in his head. In the front row, a senior professor named Dr. Henry Marsh leaned forward an inch. He had helped Harper design half the problem set the week before. He recognized the second line Jordan had written, and he could not immediately place why he recognized it. Caldwell at the end of the row picked his pen back up. He did not write anything with it. He just held it. Harper stood 3 feet from the lectern, watching the side of Jordan's face, waiting for him to falter. Waiting for the moment she could step in and end the joke at his expense and move the meeting along. The moment did not come. Jordan turned the first page over. Whitlock looked up from her notes for the first time since the packet had been handed out. She studied the back of Jordan's head for a long second, then looked at Harper, then looked back at Jordan. Something in her face sharpened. The room had stopped pretending the meeting was still happening. Somebody coughed. A chair creaked. Outside in the hallway, a distant door closed. The clock above the whiteboard ticked through its small mechanical rhythm, and the second hand swept past the 12. Jordan did not look up. He did not check the clock. He did not look at Harper. He worked through the first problem the way he had once worked through problems in a small apartment kitchen at 2 in the morning, when the rest of his life had collapsed around him, and the only quiet thing left was the page in front of him. He finished the first problem at the top of page 2. Harper took half a step forward, then stopped. She had not yet realized that the room was no longer hers. Dr. Henry Marsh leaned over the shoulder of the professor next to him and said something too quietly to be heard. The other man followed his eyes to the lectern and did not respond. Both of them stayed, leaned forward. Jordan worked through the second problem at a pace that did not match anything the room had been prepared for. He was not racing. He was not showing off. He moved the way a carpenter moves through familiar wood, finding the grain by touch and following it without needing to look up. Harper had stopped smiling. She had not consciously decided to stop. The expression had simply left her face when the second page turned. She took 2 steps closer to the lectern, close enough now that she could see the notation he was using, He had skipped a step she would have written out. He had skipped two. The shorthand was not student shorthand. It was the shorthand of someone who had stopped needing the long version a long time ago. She told herself he was guessing. She told herself he had seen this kind of problem on a board somewhere and was reproducing patterns he didn't understand. The thought arrived already weak. It collapsed when he wrote the next line. In the back of the room, a younger professor named Dr. Aaron Reeves slid his packet aside and stopped pretending to read his own copy. He had been hired 3 years earlier, specifically because of his work in the same area as the second problem on the sheet. He recognized the substitution Jordan had just made, and he had never seen it written that cleanly outside of a published paper. Reeves looked at Harper. Harper was no longer looking back at the room. She was watching the page. Whitlock in the second row set her pen down on her notebook and turned slightly in her chair so that she could see the lectern fully. She was not the kind of woman who made faces in meetings. She made one now. It was small, and it was held only for half a second, and it was directed at Harper, who did not see it. Jordan turned the second page over. The third problem was the one Marsh had argued for during the design meeting the previous week. He had wanted it on the sheet because he believed it would separate the genuine analysts in the department from the ones who had been coasting on old work. It involved a sequence of nested constructions that required the solver to hold 3 layers of abstraction in mind at once. Marsh had personally taken 40 minutes to write out the solution he was satisfied with. Jordan read it for what looked like 10 seconds. Then he wrote. He did not write the solution Marsh had drafted. He wrote a different one. The opening move was a reframing of the entire problem, the kind of move a textbook would describe as elegant, and a referee would describe as clean. It changed the problem from a calculation into a structural observation. And once the observation was written down, the rest of the work shrank into something a person could do in a single page. Marsh sat back in his chair. The motion was slow, and it was involuntary. He looked at the man next to him again. This time, the man met his eyes. "That's not the path," Marsh said quietly. "That's a better path." Caldwell at the end of the row was now openly watching. He had not picked up his pen again. His hands rested on the notepad in front of him, with a stillness that everyone who had served on a committee with him recognized. The room had moved past curiosity. It had moved past discomfort. It had arrived at the kind of attention a room only produces once or twice in a career, when the agenda everyone walked in with has been replaced by something nobody planned for and nobody can stop watching. Harper finally spoke. Her voice was lower than it had been before, and the friendliness was gone from it. "Mr. Blake." Jordan did not look up. "Mr. Blake, I'd like you to stop." He finished the line he was writing. Then he looked at her. He did not say anything. He simply waited. "This isn't appropriate," Harper said. "This is a closed faculty session. I shouldn't have offered the packet. I'm withdrawing it." She reached toward the lectern. Caldwell's voice cut across the room before her hand reached the page. "Evelyn." It was a single word. He had not raised his voice. He had not needed to. Harper turned her head toward him. Her hand stopped where it was halfway to the packet. "Let him finish," Caldwell said. The room held still. Harper's hand stayed in the air for one more second, then withdrew. She stepped back from the lectern. She did not sit down. She stood off to the side, arms at her sides, now the stack of evaluator notes still pressed against her ribs. Jordan went back to the page. He worked through the rest of the third problem without breaking his rhythm. He did not look up again. The pen moved across the paper in clean, unhurried strokes, and the only adjustments he made were small ones, a single crossed-out symbol replaced with a tighter expression, a bracket extended to absorb a term he had decided to carry one more step before discarding. Whitlock had begun writing in her own notebook. She was not taking minutes. She was copying what he was writing. Her handwriting was faster than his, and she was 3 lines behind him, and she was not stopping. 2 seats over Reeves had started doing the same thing. The third problem ended in a result Marsh had not seen before. Jordan boxed it lightly with the pen, the way a professional habitually marks a final answer, and turned to the fourth page. The fourth problem was the one Harper herself had written. She had submitted a version of it to a journal 6 months ago, and the referees had asked for revisions. She had been working on those revisions ever since. The previous Thursday, sitting alone in her office at 9 o'clock at night, she had drafted the cleaner version of the problem that now sat in the packet, hoping to use it to push back against the junior faculty member who had published in her subfield. She had placed it on the sheet because she wanted to see whether anyone in the department could engage with it at the level she was engaging with it. She had assumed that nobody would. Jordan read it. He read it twice. He read it a third time. The pace was different now. He was not stalling. He was looking at the structure of the question itself, the way a person looks at a building before deciding which door to use. For the first time since he had picked up the pen, he set it down on the lectern. He stood there for a long moment without writing. He did not look at Harper. He did not look at the room. He looked at the page. Harper watched him. Her arms had crossed again at some point. She was not aware of when. The packet under her arm had begun to slip. She caught it without taking her eyes off him. When Jordan picked the pen up again, he wrote a single sentence across the top of the page. It was not notation. It was English. He wrote, "The problem assumes the framework is closed. It isn't." Then he started over from a different angle. He did not solve Harper's problem the way Harper had been trying to solve it. He did something else. He pointed out a hidden assumption inside the problem statement itself, the kind of assumption a researcher embeds without noticing, because they have spent 6 months living inside it. He removed the assumption. The problem became a different problem. The new problem had a clean answer, and he wrote it down. The answer made Harper's 6 months of revision work obsolete. She understood this in the silence that followed. She understood it before anyone else in the room understood it, because she was the only person in the room who had been carrying the original version of the question in her head for that long. Her eyes moved across the line he had written. Then they moved across it again. The color in her face shifted slightly in a direction she would not have been able to control, even if she had known it was happening. She made a small sound. Not a word. A short breath that almost became one. Marsh saw her face. He did not say anything. Caldwell saw her face. He set his hands flat on the notepad and waited. Jordan finished the work. He capped the pen. He set it down beside the packet. He stepped back from the lectern. He had not spoken since he had walked to the front of the room. The clock above the whiteboard read 19 minutes past 9. Harper had given the room 15 minutes for the packet. Jordan had used 11. The faculty did not clap. Nobody in that kind of room would have clapped. What happened instead was quieter and harder to describe. A senior professor in the third row removed his glasses and rubbed the bridge of his nose. A woman near the window closed her eyes for a moment and opened them again. Reeves in the back was still writing. Whitlock looked up from her notebook and looked directly at Harper. "Evelyn," she said, and her voice was even. "Did you read what he just wrote on the fourth problem?" Harper did not answer. "Did you read it?" Whitlock said again. Not a question this time. Caldwell stood up. He was a tall man, and when he stood, he tended to do it slowly, and the room tended to go quiet for him, whether he asked it to or not. He walked to the lectern. He picked up the packet Jordan had left there. He turned the pages. He read the first one. He read the second. He spent longer on the third. He spent longer still on the fourth. He did not look up while he read. When he finished, he set the packet down carefully, the way a man sets down something he intends to come back to. "Mr. Blake," he said. Jordan met his eyes. "How long have you been working in this building?" "Almost 4 years," Jordan said. His voice was lower than the room had expected. It was the voice of a man who had not used it for anything important in a long time. And before that, Jordan did not answer immediately. Whatever calculation was happening behind his face was a private one. When he spoke again, he kept the answer short. "I left school. Family situation. I didn't go back." "Where did you leave from?" State school. 2 states over. How far in odd junior year? Caldwell nodded slowly. He did not press. I'd like to speak with you after the session ends, he said. If you can stay. I can stay. Harper finally moved. She walked back toward her seat in the front row, but she did not sit down. She stood next to it. She was looking at the floor. Caldwell turned to the room. We'll take a 15-minute break, he said. Reconvene at 9:45. The faculty stood in slow stages. Nobody spoke loudly. Nobody walked quickly. Marsh remained in his chair for a full minute after the others had begun to move. Then he stood up, walked to the lectern, picked up the packet Jordan had filled in, and carried it back to his seat. He sat down again with it in front of him and began reading from page 1. Jordan walked back along the wall to the spot where he had set the mop. He did not look at Harper as he passed her. He did not look at Caldwell either. He picked up the mop, set it back into the cart, and pushed the cart out of the lecture hall through the side door. He did not push it far. He left it in the hallway against the wall and stood next to it for a moment, with one hand resting on the handle. His hand was steady. He registered this with mild surprise, and then with no surprise at all. The hallway was empty. From inside the room behind him, he could hear voices beginning to rise low and overlapping the sound of a meeting that had stopped being the meeting it was supposed to be. He waited there for the break to end. The break did not last 15 minutes. It lasted closer to 30. Caldwell stayed inside the lecture hall the whole time, and 3 other senior faculty stayed with him, and the door remained closed. Jordan stood in the hallway with his cart and watched the second hand on his watch move past 9:45, then past 9:50. Frank Delaney came down the corridor at one point carrying a clipboard and stopped when he saw Jordan standing still. He looked at the closed door of the lecture hall, then back at Jordan, then at the cart that had not been moved. "You all right?" Frank asked. "I'm fine." "You done with the 3rd floor?" "I'll get to it." Frank nodded slowly. He was not a man who pried, and he did not start now. He kept walking down the hallway and turned the corner and did not look back. When the lecture hall door opened again, it was Whitlock who came out first. She saw Jordan and walked over without hesitation. Up close, she was shorter than she had looked from the 2nd row, and her expression was the careful, measured expression of a person who had spent the last 20 minutes choosing her words. "Dr. Caldwell would like you to come back inside," she said. "Just you. The general session is over." Jordan looked at the cart. "Leave it," Whitlock said. "Nobody's going to touch it." He walked back into the hall. Most of the faculty had cleared out. The packets had been collected. Harper was still there, standing near the window, now her back half turned to the room. Caldwell was at the front, seated on the edge of the lecture table with the packet Jordan had filled in, lying flat next to him. Marsh and Reeves were in the front row, not speaking to each other. 3 other senior professors Jordan did not know by name were seated nearby. "Mr. Blake," Caldwell said, gesturing toward the chair beside him. "Please," Jordan sat. "I'd like to ask you to do something," Caldwell said. "And I want to be clear that you can say no. We'd like to give you a different problem, not from the packet. Something we'd write here now in the room. You'd have as much time as you need. No audience beyond the people you see." Jordan looked around the room. "What?" It was the first question he had asked anyone all morning. "Because what you did on the 4th problem isn't the kind of thing a person does by accident," Caldwell said. "And before this department decides anything about what happens next, we'd like to be sure of what we're looking at. That's for your protection as much as ours." Jordan thought about it. "All right," he said. Reeves stood up and walked to the whiteboard. He picked up a marker and wrote out a problem in clean, careful handwriting. It took him about 4 minutes. When he stepped back, Jordan read it from where he was sitting. It was harder than anything on the original packet. Reeves had not written it down to be cruel. He had written it down because it was a question he himself had been working on for 2 months and had not yet answered. "Take your time," Caldwell said. Jordan stood up, walked to the whiteboard, and picked up a different marker. He worked at the board for almost 40 minutes. He did not solve it the way Reeves had been trying to solve it. He approached it the way he had approached the fourth problem on the packet, by questioning the frame before doing the work inside the frame. Twice he stopped, set the marker down, walked the length of the board, and started again from a different point. The second time he started over, Marsh stood up and moved closer, then sat down again on the lecture table, 3 feet from where Caldwell was sitting. When Jordan finished, the board was full. Reeves stood up slowly and walked to the front. He read the work from left to right. He read it a second time. Then he turned to Caldwell and said only one word. "Yes." Caldwell looked at the board for a long time after that. Harper had not moved from the window. "Mr. Blake," Caldwell said, "would you mind stepping back into the hallway for a few more minutes? We'd like to talk." Jordan stepped out. The conversation behind the closed door took almost an hour. Frank Delaney came by again at some point and saw Jordan sitting on a low ledge near the window at the end of the hallway, and this time did not even ask. He just nodded once and kept walking. When the door opened, Whitlock came out again. So did Caldwell. The others stayed inside. Caldwell sat down on the ledge beside Jordan. He did not speak right away. He was a man who used silence the way other men used sentences, and the silence he sat in now was not empty. "What you did this morning," Caldwell said, would be unusual coming from a sixth-year graduate student. Coming from someone who left school in his junior year and hasn't been in a classroom in over a decade, it's something else. "I want to be careful about the word I use because words like that get thrown around in this building and they usually mean less than they sound." Jordan listened. "The department would like to offer you a path back," Caldwell said. "A funded one. We have a fellowship line that hasn't been filled this year. It would cover tuition. It would cover a stipend. It wouldn't be charity. You'd be expected to earn it, and the people who would be evaluating you would not go easy on you. But the door would be open, and we'd hold it open for as long as you needed to walk through it." Jordan looked at his hands. "I have a life," he said. "Outside this building. There are responsibilities I can't step away from. A funded slot helps. It doesn't fix everything." "I understand that." "Do you?" Caldwell took the question seriously. "I understand it the way someone who hasn't lived it can understand it," he said. "Which is partially. I'm not going to pretend I know the math of your week. What I can tell you is that the offer is real, and the structure is flexible, and we have negotiated stranger arrangements than yours before. If the answer is yes, we'll find a way to make it work. If the answer is no, the offer stays open. You don't have to decide today. You don't have to decide this month." Jordan nodded slowly. "There's one more thing," Caldwell said. "And I want to say it now, rather than have it sit between us." Jordan looked at him. "What happened in there this morning was not appropriate. The packet should not have been handed to you the way it was. I've already said that to Dr. Harper, and I'll be saying it again formally, in a setting that matters. I'm telling you, because you should know, that the institution is aware of what occurred. You do not need to carry that part yourself." Jordan let out a slow breath. He did not say anything. "Take a few days," Caldwell said. He stood up. "Or take a few weeks. Frank will keep your hours. Nothing changes here unless you decide it does." He walked back into the lecture hall and closed the door behind him. Jordan stayed on the ledge. About 10 minutes later, the door opened again, and Harper came out alone. She did not walk past him. She stopped a few feet away. She had the packet in her hand, the one he had filled in. The cover sheet had been folded back. She was holding the fourth page on top. "Mr. Blake," she said. Her voice was different than it had been at the lectern. There was no smile in it now, and no audience to perform for. "I was wrong this morning," she said. "I was wrong in a way I'm going to have to think about for a long time. I'm not going to make a scene of apologizing to you. I don't think a scene is what you want from me. But I owe you the words, and I'm saying them now, in this hallway, where there's nobody to hear them. I'm sorry." Jordan looked at her. You assumed something about me, he said. You weren't the first person to do it. You won't be the last. That's not a reason to have done it. No, it isn't. She held the packet out to him. You should have this, she said. The fourth problem, the work you did on it. You were right about the assumption. I had been carrying that assumption for 6 months, and I couldn't see it. You read it once, and you saw it. I'd like to talk to you about the rest of it. Not today. When you're ready. He took the packet from her. She walked back into the lecture hall. Jordan sat on the ledge for another long stretch, holding the folded packet against his knee. The hallway was quiet. Somewhere on a different floor, a class let out, and a wave of footsteps moved through the building and then receded. He did not feel triumphant. He had expected to. He had imagined this kind of moment more than once during the long years between his junior year and this morning, and in the imagined version he had felt vindicated. What he felt instead was simpler and quieter. He felt seen. He felt seen for the first time since he had walked into the building 4 years earlier, and he understood sitting there on the ledge that being seen was not the end of anything. It was the beginning of a different kind of work. He stood up. He picked up his cart from where he had left it. He pushed it down the hallway toward the 3rd floor, the squeaking wheel turning under his hand, and the folded packet tucked carefully inside his jacket against his chest. The door of the lecture hall closed behind him. The story did not end there, but the part of it that had to happen in that building on that morning was finished.